Hey everybody, my name is James. Hope you're doing well today. 2023 was a great year for the amusement park industry, and I was able to experience some of the best roller coasters in America for the first time. I've always wanted to make a coaster rankings video, but I felt like before this year I didn't have a competent roster of rides. I got to ride over 30 new coasters this year, and my top rides were definitely switched up a bit, so I do think it's time to make an official rankings video. Kicking off at number 25, I have Montu, the B&M invert from Busch Gardens, Tampa. It's weird to think that this won't be the only invert at Busch Gardens Tampa for much longer, but I think regardless that it will still be the best. Montu absolutely wowed me with the way it uses the terrain at the end of the ride. Inverts can kind of be hit or miss for me sometimes, but the sequencing and pacing of this ride really surprised me, as I did not think I would enjoy this ride as much as I did, to be honest. I try to go into all rides with the least amount of bias as possible, and Montu is one of those rides that just exceeded my expectations. But my favorite inverted still standing roller coaster, Rip Volcano, is Afterburn at Carowinds. People tend to compare Montu and Afterburn quite a lot, and while many would argue Montu is the better ride, I enjoyed my rides on Afterburn a lot more. Because of some of the other coasters at Carowinds, Afterburn can kind of get overlooked at its own park, which is kind of a shame, but this ride definitely brings out the best of the B&M invert model. Going from a B&M invert to a B&M hyper, at number 23 we have Mako at SeaWorld Orlando. When I went to SeaWorld Orlando, Mako was the only major coaster that was open, so I definitely got to ride it more than I normally would have, but boy, this thing is a blast. Every single hill on this ride absolutely delivers, while still remaining a smooth ride that pretty much everyone can enjoy. But it's not my favorite B&M Hyper, because at number 22, I have Nitro at Six Flags Great Adventure. I'm with Sarah from Coaster Studios on this one. Nitro, in my opinion, is the best current form of the B&M Hyper that it can get. It's smooth, it has nice forces, and it has airtime over every single hill. Also, it doesn't have seatbelts, which is pretty cool. I was able to lap this thing because the lines when I was at Great Adventure were pretty much non-existent, so I definitely have a good appreciation for this. Everything I said about Mako pretty much applies to this one. I just think Nitro is a little bit more refined overall. At number 21, I'm sorry about all these B&M coasters in a row. I'll promise we'll move on after this, but I have Orion at Kings Island. I'm not gonna lie, Orion kind of disappointed me a little bit. I felt like Kings Island kind of cheaped out and did the absolute bare minimum for this ride. I would argue rides like Nitro and Mako are a little bit more complete than Orion, but some of the additional features like the speed, the height, and the pacing do add a little bit more to make this ride better than those. I do think a couple extra elements would have gone a long way, but overall I was pleased with Orion. At number 20, I have King Ka from Six Flags Great Adventure. Talk about a rush. While it may not be the tallest roller coaster in the world for much longer, it's definitely more accessible to me than Falcon's Flight ever will be. It's fast, intense, and one of the most terrifying attractions you can ride. Sticking with the Intamin Accelerator coaster at number 19, I have Stormrunner at Hershey Park. While the ride is still short in duration, I think the elements are some of the best found on any launch coaster. This ride is coming up on 20 years in 2024, and I really hope it stays around for the long haul. Going back to B&M for my number 18 spot, we have Fury 325 at Carowinds. A lot of people have this ranked as their favorite B&M, which while that isn't the case for me, I certainly get the appeal. I didn't get to get a re-ride on Fury this year, but the rides that I have gotten linger large in my memory. It's absolutely the star of the park and one of the most complete rides in the country for that matter. While Fury has had issues this year with the crack support debacle, I don't think the overall consensus has changed much among the coaster community. Fury is an absolute icon. My highest rated B&M would be number 17, Tatsu at Six Flags Magic Mountain. Wow, I have to admit, I thought all flying coasters would be pretty similar in comparison to the Superman Ultimate Flight clones, but Tatsu goes far beyond that. In my opinion, this is the best layout B&M has ever made, and it's not even close. It's one of the most criminally underrated coasters in America. At number 16, we have our first appearance from Aerodynamics, which will be Magnum XL 200. On top of the incredible ride experience, which I'll get to in a minute, Magnum set a standard for the advancement of thrill rides, which led to the infamous coaster wars of the 90s, where parks all over America were trying to best each other with different records of roller coasters such as height, speed, and length. Magnum was the first ever coaster to go over 200 feet, and for the first attempt, they absolutely nailed it. I will not lie to you guys, this is not the most comfortable ride experience, but if you're able to look past that, you are left with one of the most unhinged coasters that there is. I think we can expect some renovations to the ride in the not so distant future, but for right now, I think Cedar Point is committed to keeping this historical coaster around for as long as they can. At number 15, we have one of the newer coasters on this list, which is Pantheon at Busch Gardens Williamsburg. I'm not gonna lie, of any coaster on this list that deserves re-rides, it's Pantheon. I got 10 rides on preview day when it was 36 degrees out in 2022, but I've not returned to the park since. Still, Pantheon absolutely blew away the expectations I had for the ride. Intamin really took advantage of the switch track technology in the best way possible, and every element on the ride absolutely delivers. At number 14, we have a ride that I've been riding for a while now, which is the mighty Skyrush at Hershey Park. If there's something I would compare Skyrush to, it would be a car crash, honestly. It's really that intense, and I love every second of it. The duration definitely holds back this ride from being an elite ride, but don't let that take away from the absolute insanity it has to offer. Skyrush really makes Hershey's already stacked lineup that much better. At number 13, we have the first appearance of RMC, which is Twisted Colossus at Six Flags Magic Mountain. After my first couple rides, I was really debating whether I liked this or Tatsu more as the second best ride in the park. And while Colossus has some features such as this long second lift hill, which I'm definitely not a fan of, I cannot deny this ride absolutely delivers on both sides. If you were only able to ride one side of the coaster at a time, I think my opinion on the ride would be much more sour, but the fact that you were able to ride both is such a cool bonus. It is important to note though, during both of my trips to Magic Mountain last year, I did not get a single dueling ride, which is kind of annoying, but Twisted Colossus is still a world-class hybrid roller coaster. There is no such thing as a bad RMC. Number 12 is Maverick at Cedar Point, a ride that has significantly risen in my rankings over the course of the year, even though I didn't even ride it this year. With all the amazing rides at Cedar Point, the 100-foot-tall Maverick can be often overlooked, but many, myself included, consider this coaster to be the second best ride in the park. Maverick is super punchy and out of control, while remaining comfortable with its restraints and smoothness. It's unfortunate that at my one day at Cedar Point I was so hyper-focused on its neighbor Steel Vengeance, or else my opinion on Maverick may even be higher. Who knows? I'll be re-riding it next year, so I'll be sure to let you guys know. At number 11 is Ghost Rider at Knott's Berry Farm, a coaster I had the pleasure to ride for the first time this year. I will admit, I am normally not the biggest fan of wooden roller coasters, but this one is just spectacular. My day at Knott's was very rainy, and to be honest, I was kind of expecting the worst, but Ghost Rider was open for the entire day with a minimal line. Ghost Rider showed me what a good wooden roller coaster looks like, and gave me a newfound appreciation for other wooden roller coasters. I'll be getting to my favorite wooden roller coaster in a minute, but regardless, Ghost Rider provides one of the best ride experiences in the whole state of California. At number 10 is a ride that gave me one of the best days I've ever had at a theme park, which is Phantom's Revenge at Kennywood. When I tell you I got over 10 Zen rides on a ready weekend day, I'm not exaggerating. There was absolutely nobody there, and I couldn't believe it. I ended up getting 35 rides over the course of 2 days, which is all it took to make this ride elite in my book. This ride absolutely fascinated me because of its unique layout along with its fascinating history with its renovation received in 2001. While some say this coaster lacks in duration a little bit, in any of my rides I never got off thinking that it was too short. I think for what it is, they couldn't really have made Phantom's Revenge much better at all. Alrighty, now we're getting into the elite rides on my list. Some of these rides could be interchangeable position-wise, but I think the way I have it orchestrated now is the way I want it. Alright, if there's any ride on this list that has danger of moving or dropping a few spots, it would have to be my number 9 coaster, El Toro at Six Flags Great Adventure. This ride has its stands, but after my rides this year, I thought it was almost too rough to be enjoyable. The jackhammering around some of the turns is something that you can't really prepare yourself for, regardless what seat you're in. I'm willing to give this ride the benefit of the doubt just because how insane it is and because of the issues it's had over the past few years, but expect this ride to drop if I get another bad ride on it. But for right now, it's my favorite wooden roller coaster. At number 8 is the only ride on this list that my mom has ridden, ironically. It's Iron Rattler at Six Flags Fiesta Texas. This is another ride that I just lapped because the weather was hot and there was nobody there. 30 rides total in 2 days, and wow, this thing packs a punch. Easily the best drop on any RMC with one of the best layouts to boot. While I was disappointed about how slow it takes the Quarry Wall section, I didn't let that take away from the absolute genius design of this ride, with it hopping on and off the quarry wall and even into a tunnel. I would say the airtime on Iron Rattler is the most intense of any RMC, and that's really saying something. I'm not even gonna lie, I don't even know where to start with number 7. I've been riding Twisted Timbers since its opening weekend of 2018, and I have over 1,000 rides, and I still enjoy it as much as I do now as I did then. I said it back when it opened, and I still say it now. I can't think of a single thing RMC could have done to make this conversion better. Every element executes flawlessly. I know it may seem like I have some sort of bias towards the ride, but I really think that this is the best smaller RMC, and while I haven't ridden all of them in America, I imagine Twisted Timbers will not move far from this spot. Speaking of not moving far, at number 6 we go from one Coaster King's Dominion to another. We have Intimidator 305, the world's most intense roller coaster. And there's absolutely no debate for that, but this ride offers so much more than that. From start to finish, this is one of the most deranged rides I've ever been on. It's definitely one of those rides where I won't really blame people if they want to chicken out because the name Intimidator really fits the bill. It would be a shame if the name was to ever be changed, but thankfully, even if it was, it wouldn't affect the amazing ride Intimidator is. Starting off the top 5 with the coaster I rode the most this year.
We have Wildcats Revenge at Hershey Park. This is a ride that I'm all too familiar with now. Pretty good.
Well, this wasn't my favorite new coaster of the year. I got over 200 rides on it, and it just doesn't get old. I'm so happy Hershey got this RMC finally. When I heard the original Wildcat was closing down in the summer of 2022, I instantly knew it was coming, and they absolutely nailed this ride. They could not have done a better job. I'm so grateful again that Hershey finally got this ride, and it was everything I wanted it to be and more. So yeah, that's why it's at the number 5 spot. Some of you may be surprised to see how low this ride is, but at my number 4 spot, I have Steel Vengeance at Cedar Point. You want to talk about the ultimate coaster, the coaster that you plan vacations around? It's this. I can't even begin to explain the hype that surrounded this ride when it was announced. And to be honest, that hype hasn't really gone away, even after 6 years. The reason I don't have this ride higher is while I enjoy the extended duration that it offers, I find some of the elements to be a bit repetitive towards the end. And I know that's going to sound like a nitpick, but when you're ranking rides as good as these, it comes down to little things like those. Riding Steel Vengeance at night is a memory that I don't think will ever leave, and no matter how many coasters I ride. But just be warned, if you go to Cedar Point, do this ride as soon as possible because even during the week, these lines are just terrible. At my number 3 spot is my favorite coaster by RMC, which is Iron Gwazi at Busch Gardens, Tampa Bay. When I rode Steel Vengeance, I didn't think RMC could be any better, but I was sorely mistaken. Iron Gwazi takes the concept of a hyper hybrid and fixes the issues that I had with Steel Vengeance, adding a more aggressive layout with better sequencing. Iron Gwazi feels way more out of control than Steel Vengeance does. And while some factors like the horrible dispatch intervals were annoying to deal with, I think that there is a solid argument for Gwazi being the better ride. My number 2 coaster is one of the most complete roller coaster experiences out there, which is Velocicoaster at Universal's Islands of Adventure. One of the best days I've ever had at the theme park was when I got to go ride Velocicoaster for the first time. Me and my friend Connor got up at 6 a.m. just so we could be one of the first people in line, and this ride was just incredible. I actually was wearing my Twisted Timbers outfit, and the ride op, who must have been a coaster enthusiast, saw it and let us ride for a second time in the back row without getting back in line, which was just incredible because we waited 2 hours in line and we got to ride a second time. It was just unbelievable. But the whole experience, and even the theme station, which is really why I didn't even mind waiting in line, it was just the whole overall presentation of this ride is just perfect. This ride is split into 2 distinct sections, separated by one of the best launches on any roller coaster. And I understand if people put this at their number 1 spot. I completely get it. The hype for this ride is real, and I can't wait to go back to ride it again. But before we get to the number 1 spot, there is an honorable mention I would like to do. I would feel remiss if I did not mention this ride. It's Lightning Rod at Dollywood. I decided not to rank this coaster because of the renovation it is currently receiving, changing the launched lift hill to a chain lift. If you want my opinion, I honestly think this was a mid-tier RMC of the ones I've done. But I'm going to hold further judgment until I'm able to ride the new and improved Lightning Rod because some of the issues I had with the ride were because of how it was being operated, and that's going to be changing. But I rode one more ride this year that absolutely just enthralled me. It's the first time I've ridden a roller coaster after my first ride, and I instantly knew it was my favorite. A ride with such extremity that it was named after it. I'm of course talking about X2. I went out to California in January to ride it, and I was devastated when it was closed. I had traveled all the way out here, and it was my number 1 bucket list coaster, and I just had to go back. So in March, I went out to California again, and I was rewarded with one of the most insane ride experiences imaginable. I imagine this coaster has flaws, but when I ride it, I'm just having too much fun to care. I rode this ride in almost every single row, and it just delivers. It's unbelievable to me that this ride came out 20 years ago. I mean, it's just so ahead of its time. It's wild. I can't recommend this coaster enough. In my opinion, if you're going to plan a vacation around a specific ride, this would be the ride for you. Magic Mountain is just an incredible park. It wouldn't be Magic Mountain without X2. But anyways, thank you guys so much for watching. This year was absolutely a blast. I'll be hitting up a lot of new parks in 2024, so expect a lot more coaster content from me. But today, that's all I have for you. So, you guys have a great day. Happy New Year.